His family had starved, but he himself was too well fed. In the far north, winter teaches a particular kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against the ribs, the kind that stretches nights so long they seem to erase memory itself. For Algonquian peoples across the Great Lakes, the boreal forests, and the frozen interior of what is now Canada and the northern United States, winter was never just a season. It was a test of balance, a test of restraint, a test of whether a community could hold together when hunger sharpened every thought. And in that long darkness, they told stories, not to entertain, but to survive. One of those stories still walks with us. They called it the Wendigo, or Wheatigo, or Waytigo, or Chenoo. Different names, shared meaning. The Wendigo was not born a monster. It was made. It began as a human being, someone who crossed a line that simply could not be uncrossed, someone who had suffered so severe starvation that cannibalism became imaginable. Sometimes it was through spiritual corruption, sometimes through dreams, curses, or isolation that hollowed a person from the inside out. Once the transformation began, it fed on itself. The Wendigo was described as tall and emaciated, skin stretched tight over bone, lips chewed raw by its own hunger. In many traditions, the Wendigo's heart was said to be frozen solid, encased in ice, incapable of warmth or empathy. The more it consumed, the hungrier it became. The more it took, the less human it remained. This was not a story about monsters in the woods. This was a story about what happens when need becomes greed, when survival becomes domination, when the self consumes the community. Cannibalism in these cultures was not merely taboo. It was the ultimate moral collapse. To eat another person was to destroy the web of reciprocity that allowed people to endure winter together, to survive and bond together. So the Wendigo simply embodied this collapse. It was the warning given flesh. Early European missionaries, unfamiliar with this moral universe, recorded cases in the 1600s of indigenous people who, during brutal winters, were said to suddenly be seized by a strange ailment, an overwhelming hunger for human flesh. Some were killed by their own communities in acts of grim necessity, not punishment, but protection. Those deaths would soon haunt the record for good, but none more than one winter in the late 1800s. In 1879, a Cree trapper named Swift Runner was led to the gallows in Fort Saskatchewan, becoming the first person legally executed in what is now Alberta. Over the course of a single winter, Swift Runner murdered and ate 8 members of his own family: his wife, 6 children,
5
children, his mother, and his brother. When spring came, he walked alone into a Catholic mission and told the priests that his family had starved, but he himself was too well fed. Authorities then followed him back to his winter camp. There, scattered across the ground, were human bones. Some had been cracked open to extract the marrow. Cooking pots still held traces of human fat. Swift Runner confessed. He did not deny what he had done. He also didn't try to excuse it. He said only that he had been possessed by the Wendigo. He spoke of screaming fits and nightmares, of icy cold in his chest, of something inside him that could not be satisfied. Before his execution, he told a priest that he was the least of men, unworthy even of the name human. To colonial courts, Swift Runner was a murderer. To sensational newspapers, a monster. To later psychiatrists, a possible example of what came to be known as Wendigo psychosis. And to indigenous communities, his story was something far more unsettling. Because Swift Runner's case was almost unique. In nearly every other documented instance, people believing to be turning Wendigo did not kill others. Instead, they often begged to be killed themselves, before they harmed their families. Communities carried out executions as acts of last resort, a way to prevent a greater devastation. In those stories, the Wendigo was not glamorized. It was pitied, feared, and mourned. The transformation was seen as an illness of spirit, a severing from kinship, land, and obligation. A human being cut loose from the moral gravity that keeps hunger from becoming predation. This is where the modern culture starts to lose the thread. Today, the Wendigo stalks horror movies and video games as a horned beast, an antlered demon, a cryptid lurking in snowy forests. It's portrayed as an apex predator, a supernatural slasher, something to be hunted and destroyed. But in traditional stories, the Wendigo rarely had antlers. It was not a werewolf or a deer demon or a forest god. It was human. That difference matters, because once you understand the Wendigo as a moral figure rather than a monster, it becomes impossible to confine it to the past. Indigenous thinkers have long insisted that the Wendigo never left. In the 20th century, Cree scholar Jack D. Forbes argued that the most dangerous form of cannibalism is not literal, but systemic. He described imperialism, slavery, genocide, and industrial exploitation as expressions of what he called Wetiko's disease, a cultural psychosis that consumes lives, lands, and futures while insisting it is simply progress. In this framework, the Wendigo is not starving in the forest. It's simply sitting at a desk, signing contracts, stripping forests, poisoning rivers, extracting wealth without limit. Some indigenous activists have applied this lens to modern environmental destruction, particularly resource extraction that ravages ecosystems while sacrificing indigenous communities. The hunger is endless. The heart remains frozen. Ownership replaces relationship. In these interpretations, the Wendigo is no longer just a cautionary tale about famine. It's a diagnosis. And yet, this is crucial. The story is not without hope. In some traditions, especially among the Wabanaki, there are Wendigo figures who can be healed through warmth, through care, through reconnection to others. A frozen heart slowly thawed. Even contemporary indigenous authors often refuse the total annihilation that dominates Western horror. Their Wendigos can be escaped, outsmarted, sometimes even redeemed. That refusal matters too, because the original purpose of the story was never despair. It was just survival. The Wendigo today exists to remind us that hunger without restraint destroys everything it touches, that isolation can breed a monster, that when a society rewards endless accumulation, it risks freezing its own heart. And perhaps that's why this story still persists. Not because we fear monsters in the woods, but because we recognize the shape of the hunger. The Wendigo's not waiting for us in the snow. It's waiting wherever greed is mistaken for necessity, wherever consumption replaces care, wherever the self forgets the community that makes it human. And winter, as it always has, is still watching to see which stories we choose to live by.